Thank you, Grace, and good afternoon, everybody. I am really honored and pleased to have this opportunity to present, to speak to you this afternoon. As people were introducing themselves, I was just impressed with the amount of talent and experience that's in this room. So for me to have a chance to take 1 hour of your time with some of the ideas that interest me is an exceptional opportunity. Before I start on the presentation, there are a couple of sort of personal remarks I want to make. In the room is Tom Peterson, who was my predecessor at NSF, and I went to NSF largely because of Tom, because he had invited me to serve on his advisory panel, which ultimately led to me taking that job. Grace, one of the great joys of my time at NSF, and certainly what made it much more successful than it would have otherwise been, was Grace. I mean, working with Grace was a real pleasure. She and I made a wonderful team and did lots of, I think, mostly good things. Hopefully didn't cause any damage. And I'm just so happy that, okay. Just so happy that Grace invited me to speak here to your group. And then finally, Mira Sampath, who is sitting in this room, she was actually a grad student at University of Michigan when I was a professor there. Now she's an associate vice chancellor. It's so wonderful to see. She also was with Xerox for some number of years, and I was a consultant to Xerox for some time. But the reason I bring up Mira is not just because the personal connection I have with her, but the fact that one of the topics at this meeting is future of work. And Mira and I actually wrote a paper on that topic, and I'm very sorry that I'm going to miss that whole discussion about future of work, because that interests me just as much as does convergence. So with that, let me share with you some ideas and thoughts and visions about convergence. I consider it to be a paradigm. It's a paradigm in doing research, and hopefully that will become clear as I go about it. It's paradigm in the Kuhn sense of the word. So in the sense of structure of scientific revolutions, Kuhn, I guess he gets criticized for overuse of that word and so forth. I'm not here to criticize Kuhn. I'm simply here to say that one can think of this as a real paradigm shift in how research is conducted, how knowledge is generated. And so that's sort of the most visionary view of what convergence can be, is a new method for creation of useful knowledge. So I will touch on these topics, and hopefully there will be time for Q&A and then discussion during the rest of the day. So I'll describe convergence. I'll describe convergence for biomedical research, largely taking examples from, one example from UCI, which is the third point. Then I'll say a few things about inclusion and diversity, because this does have some bearing on the issues of inclusion and diversity, and then conclude. One of the challenges in discussing convergence is confusion in terms of definition. So what I thought I would do is just start with some definitions. What is convergence? So you can think of this as a progression from standard, 2,000-year-old history of research and generation of knowledge that goes back to fields such as physics and mathematics that have been with us for as long as our civilization has existed, more or less. That's disciplinary research, then multidisciplinary, interdisciplinary, transdisciplinary, and convergence as sort of the extreme end of this arrow. So discipline, is what we all know, and we each one of us got our degrees in some discipline that is a body of knowledge, some foundation, some fundamentals, and we sort of learn them through our undergraduate years and graduate years, and we specialize in some subset of that field and come up with some new insights or new knowledge that gets us our PhD, and then we go on and do research. So that's the most traditional form of knowledge generation and research. Multidisciplinary is sort of the next evolution of that, where juxtaposition of two or more disciplines on a question, problem, topic, or theme. So it's juxtaposition in that the two or more fields of knowledge come together, but they sort of are separate. They have their own identity, they work together. Individuals work separately, results typically published separately or compiled, but not synthesized. And so the best analogy, you see some fruit pictures there. So if you think of disciplines as individual fruits, like I show apple, banana, etc., multidisciplinary research would be like a bowl of fruits. So you put them together, they have a common theme, but the level of integration, level of interchange is not that strong, and the contributions are being published in their individual disciplines. Interdisciplinary is the next level of integration, and you can see the picture, which probably explains more than the words on my slide, which is it's a fruit salad. So you chop up the fruits into pieces, and then you mix them up. They still have their individual identities to some extent, but now they're much more mixed up. And you taste it as a whole. You don't taste them as separate fruits, okay? So integration of information, data, methods, tools, concepts, and our theories from two or more disciplines. So key defining concept for interdisciplinary is integration. So there has to be some level of integration of knowledge or tools of discovery and so forth. Individuals may work alone, but increasingly research is team-based. So that's the other feature of interdisciplinary is teams of people working together coming from different disciplines. Collaboration introduces social integration. So say students from different labs working together, for example, would be some kind of social integration. Project management, just because people come from different disciplines, you have to somehow manage the whole thing. There is likely a goal, and then communication. And so this sort of fruit salad analogy it captures the concept of interdisciplinary research. And then the next level of integration is transdisciplinary. So transdisciplinary transcends disciplinary approaches through comprehensive frameworks and paradigms. So the difference here is groups of people from different disciplines come together on a problem, and their work together or their thinking together produces a new way of thinking, a new paradigm, a new way of thinking about the problem that arises principally because different people have come together to think about a problem. So problem-oriented research that crosses boundaries, mutual learning, joint work, knowledge integration, and beyond interdisciplinary combination fosters new worldviews or new domains. So new ways of thinking about the situation at hand is what is distinguishing feature of transdisciplinary. It's more than integration. It's a new way of thinking about the problem, new way of viewing the world. And so the analogy there is a smoothie. So you put all these fruits and you blend them. So now there is no individual identity left. You have a new thing, which of course is coming from all these components, but it really has its own flavor. And so convergence is this way of thinking about research. So these are definitions. What I find frustrating in discussions about convergence is that all these terms get used indiscriminately. People use multidisciplinary, interdisciplinary, etc., without thinking about the differences. So I thought I would set the ground for you. Convergence as a way of doing research. I'm going to showcase some reports that have really brought it into prominence. I'm not showing the one report that actually precedes the MIT 2016 report. MIT had a report back in 2011 or 2012, something like that, where they started articulating this side of convergence. Then around 2014 or 2015, there was a meeting in Washington at the AAAS where it was led by MIT, but it brought people from all over the country together. I had a good fortune to represent NSF at that meeting. That led to this report. I think in the reading materials for the meeting, this report was shared. So I'm not certainly going to go into a lot of detail, but I thought I would highlight. So Phil Sharp, who is a Nobel Prize winning scientist at MIT, wrote an article, Sharp and a couple of other people whose names, I think it was Tyler Jacks and Susan Hockfield, the former president of MIT. I think they wrote the science article, Capitalize on Convergence for Healthcare. So convergence applied to health integrates expertise from life sciences with physical, mathematical, and computational sciences, as well as engineering, to form comprehensive frameworks. So you see, this is that idea of transdisciplinary research. So that's sort of the definition or conceptual view of what they are thinking. Convergence goes beyond collaboration, involves integration of historically distinct disciplines and technologies into a unified whole, offers potentially revolutionary changes for biomedical sciences. You can read the whole article for much more elaboration of what I've tried to highlight here. But the key idea is to integrate knowledge bases, tools of discovery. I think that is another dimension to this integration, that we all in individual disciplines have tools of discovery, either instruments or conceptual foundations or techniques that we all know how to use. If you can integrate those tools of discovery, that creates a whole new way of creating new knowledge. And then worldview and mindsets. Between the MIT 2011 report and 2016 report, National Research Council, under the auspice of National Academies, produced a report called Convergence, and its subtitle was Facilitating Transdisciplinary Integration of Life Sciences, Physical Sciences, Engineering, and Beyond. Their way of framing convergence in this NRC report, and I think this was shared in the reading materials, is an approach to problem solving. So they frame convergence as an approach to problem solving, integrates knowledge, tools, ways of thinking, what I've been highlighting so far, a comprehensive synthetic framework to tackle scientific and societal challenges. Two closely related but distinct properties of convergence according to the NRC. One is the convergence of expertise. That's sort of the easy part, right? I'm an electrical engineer and Tom is a chemical engineer, and we might work with a physicist and so forth. So there is clearly a convergence of expertise, but then there is this formation of web of partnerships. That's another dimension that they highlight very strongly. And those partnerships could be institutional partnerships, say two different departments or universities or research institutions coming together. It could be academic industry partnership, so a group of academics working with colleagues in industry. It could be academics and government. So there are multiple partnerships that are highlighted. So formation of a web of partnerships aimed at a specific question or problem that they are trying to solve. The NRC report goes on to talk about, and I'm not going to go into a lot of depth here, we can talk about it in Q&A if you're interested. There are four key pillars to this kind of convergence. One is sort of the obvious one, which is people. Second is organizational convergence. So this could be within an institution. So different schools, for example, and I'll give you examples from UCI, where you might have engineering school working together with, say, a School of Biological Sciences or School of Medicine or a hospital. Humanities and social sciences. So you can imagine organization. So that's within an institution, and then you can have across institutions. Then the issue of culture, which I think is really, really hard, and towards the end I will highlight the challenges. Because we know that cultures of research vary dramatically across the scientific landscape. And I think that's one thing in my own career I have learned over time as I've taken on different positions, is how these cultures vary so much, and we know so little about other cultures that we are not exposed to. And then when you bring all these people together, they bring all their cultural baggages or cultural strengths with them. And how do you get the best out of those cultural interchanges and mixes and not get all the negatives that come with those cultures? So that's a very, very big part of this convergence, is how do you get this cultural integration? And then there is an ecosystem aspect to it. So all these things are related to each other. They can help each other, but they can also hurt each other. And if you don't think of it in an ecosystem framework or ecosystem of growing things, so that different parts are supporting and feeding each other, you are not going to get the best results. So these are the key pillars for getting convergence. Then the third thing, in terms of reports and so on and so forth, and Grace alluded to this, just as I was leaving NSF in 2016 under the direction of our leader, Dr. Franz Cordova, I shouldn't really say we because I'm no longer NSF, and you get tempted to use the word we. NSF set out 10 big ideas that were the result of a lot of discussion across the foundation at all levels, from program officers in different directorates to division directors, assistant directors, and the leadership, ultimately leading to these 10 big ideas. You can look them up on NSF's website. Certainly the director and National Science Board have been promoting these big ideas. By the way, future of work is another of those NSF's 10 big ideas, which you're going to talk about later in this meeting. One of the 10 big ideas is growing convergence research. And so there is a website at NSF where if you search on NSF convergence, you'll probably see that picture and this text. So framing challenging research questions at inception and fostering the collaborations needed for successful inquiry. So grand challenges of today. Now, the thing with NSF articulation was it was no longer focused just on health. And even the NRC report went beyond biomedicine. MIT, right from the very beginning, has been very, very focused on bringing engineering and computing and physical sciences to bear on problems of health and disease. NRC expanded a little bit beyond. NSF has gone well beyond. Just given the nature of the agency, they are thinking of this as applying to all different grand challenges. Water, food, energy, water, and so on and so forth. NSF views this as a process big idea. So it sort of sees NSF's role as facilitating use of convergence type of paradigm for addressing these problems by bringing expertise across the foundation, which covers all fields of science and engineering together, including social sciences. So convergence research has two primary characteristics according to National Science Foundation: research driven by a specific and compelling problem. So there has to be some target on which you are converging. And it could be health, but it could be also environment. It could be a social problem. And then deep integration across disciplines, knowledge, theories, methods, data, research communities, which is, again, for NSF, is a very important idea because NSF fosters these research communities in different parts of the science and engineering landscape, and they want to bring the strengths of those research communities together. Languages are intermingled and integrated, new frameworks, paradigms, and disciplines from sustained interactions. So this kind of gives you a landscape of ideas around convergence and at least a few highlights of what I think underpins this way of thinking. This is the same paper of Sharp, Jacks, and Susan Hockfield, Capitalizing on Convergence for Healthcare. So that, like I said, MIT has always been kind of focusing convergence on healthcare, and that's sort of the paper in the June issue of the Science magazine. The MIT, sort of the longer 2016 report, goes through its reasoning as to why this is an important thing to do. And then it talks about 4 specific themes that they believe are very, very ripe for advances using this sort of framing. First is imaging. And imaging has historically been something where physical sciences and engineering have played an enormous role. And they make the argument that going all the way down to imaging at the level of a single cell to whole animal imaging, there are opportunities by bringing ideas from physical sciences, engineering, computation to bear on imaging for human health. I might just add in passing that one of the big initiatives in Washington during my time was the BRAIN initiative, which cut across NIH, NSF, and Department of Energy, and so forth. And one big idea behind that BRAIN initiative was creating new imaging techniques, to look at new recording techniques where you could look at Terry is in this room, so I should really be speaking much more than what I'm saying, because he's the world's leading expert on this topic. But tens of thousands of neurons simultaneously. And we did a workshop at NSF where we brought physicists who talked about advanced magnetic and innovations that could allow you to do this level of imaging in real time in situ. So I think that those are the kinds of themes that are in that imaging idea. Nanotechnology clearly, ranging everywhere from delivery using nanoparticles to different ways of using nanotechnology. I mean, a week doesn't go by where you don't see an article that shows the power of nanoscience and nanotechnology for advancing some aspect of human health, whether that's cancer or brain diseases or any of those. Third theme that they talk about is regenerative engineering and medicine, stem cells, and but the broader idea behind regenerative medicine, which clearly again is very much. I saw somebody who works on scaffolds and so forth. I forget one of our colleagues here is, or maybe he's not. He's not here yet, but he works on tissue engineering. Those are all the kinds of things that would go under that. And then finally, in 2019, certainly you want to talk about big data and machine learning for health, which has become a huge driver for private sector venture investment as to how we can use large amounts of data. I want to take a few minutes to just highlight some things that we are doing at Irvine, not because we are better at this than anybody else, just because this is also a big priority for UC Irvine. And I'm just going to use two things from what we are doing just to illustrate. So we started a Center for Complex Biological Systems some years ago, which brought together a bunch of colleagues from across the university, including philosophy of science, because there are some interesting questions about underlying scientific approach to complexity of biological systems, but had all the other traditional fields like mathematics, physics, and so on and so forth, focused on biological systems research and education. That has just been enormously successful. And this is just a chart to kind of illustrate all the good things that they have been able to do. First and foremost, they won an NIH Center, National Center for Systems Biology. I'll mention something a little bit more about this NCI Cancer Systems Biology Center that we just got last year. They do lots of work on education and conferences in Southern California. They do short courses, both at UCI as well as elsewhere, bring high school students and so forth. We competed and received a grant from NCI, which is driven by this kind of convergence thinking, whose title is Complexity, Cooperation, and Community in Cancer, led by Art Lander, Marian Waterman, and John Lowen Group. And again, it brings together various fields. And basically, the idea, and those of you who know this much more than me would be obvious to you, is that it's not just a single cell, but it's the whole tumor, and how the whole tumor reacts and how these cells interact with each other. That's just as important as, say, maybe a mutation. So they think of it as a community of cells and how they cooperate, both in response to an intervention as well as all the resistance pathways that they develop. They're trying to study all these. And so these are the pieces of it. So pattern heterogeneity in colon cancer, understanding cellular origins of melanoma, and they're using multi-scale modeling because it's like a three-dimensional entity. They are doing modeling all the way from inside a cell all the way to this tumor, and then lots of new instruments, single-cell sequencing that is for giving lots and lots of data. And so we just got started on this thing about a year ago, and so we are very hopeful that this will lead to some new knowledge. The other thing that came out of this cancer systems, systems biology center was and I am particularly proud of having Simons in the title, because Simons is a great benefactor for Stony Brook University, one of very successful individuals. So NSF and Simons Foundation created a joint program, and we were one of the 4 institutions to win in that competition. And so this is multi-scale cell fate research. This is more basic, more mathematics oriented, lots of lots of modeling at multiple levels. Cancer is not necessarily a focus for this center. They're just studying fundamental biological phenomena, but by applying multi-scale modeling approaches driven by data. Convergence involves getting people to work together. And science is one thing, knowledge is one thing, problem is one thing, but it's this human interaction that involves people is an equal issue. And so one thing we are doing is thinking about team science and team research. What do we do? Before I do that, just a collection of available books, and I'll say a little bit more about this. We started, Irvine was, when I went there, I realized that we were very fortunate to have 4 of world's leading experts on team science. So these individuals studied team science as a subject. So they are experts in the business of team science. Judy and Gary Olson, who are both computer scientists, and they did a lot of work on collaborative computing. How do teams of people work together in computing? Maritza Salazar, she's a social science scientist and in our business school. And Dan Stokols, who is a social scientist, he was former dean of our School of Social Ecology, and he has spent pretty much his whole career working on these team science issues. So I said, well, how lucky are we to have 4 of these world's leading experts on team science, and we want to do this kind of work. Can we bring you together so that you become a resource to the rest of the campus? So I started this, I got them together and we gave them a title, Team Science Accelerator Lab. And what they have kind of created, Dan and group have come up with this framing of how a team working together, how does the world look to them? So you have, at the core of this circle is the individual team members who come from different disciplines, and they would see a physical environment, a spatial environment, like think office locations, students, where are they sitting, and things, some basic environment, institutional technological features, like what's their IT environment, how easy, what's sort of the high-speed connectivity, and so forth. And then you have a bunch of teams on campus, so T1, T2, T3 represents a bunch of teams, and then as you go out, institutional multi-team system in which the team is embedded. So this is at the level of the university, which has got maybe 30, 40 such teams depending upon the size of the university. And then outside the university, which is funding agencies, government policies, private sector, non-government organizations, and so forth. So that's the framework. And the dimensions of team science is diversity of team members, disciplinary integration, size of the team, because depending on the size of the team, the problems and issues change. You might have a 5-people team, which is very different than having a 30-people team or even a larger team. Goal alignment between team members, permeable boundaries, geographic proximity. Even in this day and age of distance collaboration and so forth, we still like to bump into each other. And in fact, there is some very interesting research that shows that the probability of collaboration decreases quite dramatically if you go beyond 50 feet. It's a very small distance that after which you don't really see each other. So properly placed coffee machines and and restrooms can make a huge difference in this business. So what we are doing is this group of experts is providing consultation type of expertise to all different teams that we are enabling at Irvine. Things ranging all the way from team processes, team composition, professional development, doing work on leadership. How do you grow leaders who can lead these kinds of team activities? Support for virtual collaboration. Gary and Judy Olson have this very nice web-based interview scheme where they can get a group of people to fill out some Q&A, and that will show them how ready the team is for virtual collaboration over distance and organizational support. There is a bunch of training resources that they have drawn upon, to many of which they have contributed. I think there is this wonderful guide from National Cancer Institute, Collaboration and Team Science, a field guide. There is a very nice website called Team Science Toolkit where you can go in and click and get lots of very useful information. One of the issues that comes up in team science and more generally team research is rewards. And what happens when these people go up for promotion and tenure. Many of you in this room are provosts and deans and so forth, so you play a very big role. Although Tom is a recovering provost, or I don't know, what do you call yourself? Rehabilitating provost. So he wants to disown all this now. Anyhow, this is the real problem. This is the real problem. And even if, and I believe this to be completely true, the upper administration at most universities is very sympathetic to this. So the problem is not at that level. The problem is usually at the level of the department. So what my colleagues have been doing is working on this problem, working at all levels of the university. California, UC, and Tom is here. University of California has very elaborate system of promotion, and Terry, you are there as well. And so they've been working with the Academic Senate and academic AP offices and so forth. And one thing that they have come up with, which I think is very useful, is they have given a rubric and a framework for a faculty member who is going up for promotion to articulate their contributions in team science. So they've come up with a frame and in a different questions or different themes under which they could highlight what contributions they have made. Although it's in the setting of a team of people, what have they done? And so this right-hand side, so it's called Team Science Collaboration Index, Collaborative Index, and then they help people think how to present. So they've done the work, but now how do you present this to a group of people who are going to evaluate them? And so they come up with this, I think, very nice thing. And although it's not yet required, and we are not going to require, but we are going to give this as something to especially to junior colleagues as they go for promotion, as they write their own documents. Let's use this to see if you can make a better case for yourself. Final word on what we are doing at UCI. We are in the middle of building this wonderful building, which is very strategically placed because building to the distance are engineering towers and physical sciences buildings. And so this building that's going up is one of the largest such buildings west of Mississippi, I'm told, more than 200,000 gross square feet, which is going to be about this kind of integrative research. There are going to be two themes that we are going to pursue in this building. One is biomedicine. So we're going to bring engineering, physical sciences, computation on biomedicine and energy environment. And that building should be completed in about a year from now, and we are now working on groups of faculty occupying this building, so very exciting times ahead. I want to close by talking a little bit about inclusion and diversity, because I think it's a really important piece of this overall puzzle. So a central hypothesis in convergence is that diverse teams are able to generate innovative solutions. That is, you really want to bring different ways of thinking, different knowledge bases together, because it's in the diversity that you might have an innovative new way of thinking that hasn't yet been found. An environment where opinions, especially dissenting opinions, are openly expressed, where diversity is valued and opposing ideas are respectfully communicated, may be vital to the success. And this is from the NRC report. So as you think more carefully about this, so there are two types of diversity that you might think about. One is functional diversity. That is, do you have people from different ways of thinking, different disciplinary backgrounds? And then the other is identity diversity. That is, where do they come from? What are their life experiences? And that could be demographic, cultural, or ethnic backgrounds. So, and then, so these two sort of, they are essentially orthogonal directions. So you can have a, all Asian team of engineers, scientists, and so forth, and have no demographic or identity diversity, or you could have an identity diversity, but they may be from the same. So these are more or less independent dimensions, but that causes, or there are issues that need to be dealt with, which is challenges in social integration and communication because of the differences. The same words mean different things. So you have to go back to asking, does this word mean the same to you as it means to me? And the same phrase and so forth. Perspective, so more perspective individual team members have, the better they have a chance of overcoming this problem. But if the perspectives are very narrow, which goes back to my comment about academic cultures, that these are so diverse and so variable across fields that unless one is mindful of that cultural perspective that you're bringing, you could easily have major problems in communications. A positive aspect to having such teams with diversity of both kinds is much greater creativity and satisfaction. That is, when you are successful, it's going to be really very, very satisfying, because you will have thought of something that really no other group could have thought of because of just the collection of people that were brought together. But, so that's the positive, but such an environment can be very uncomfortable to operate in if you don't sort of come into it, and if you don't realize that people in the room or that you're working with are coming from very different points of view. And so people who are shy or so forth can find such an environment not very conducive. And therefore, inclusive attitudes and management strategies are critical to success. So unless the team leaders are deeply aware of these challenges, they will not be able to mitigate all the downsides and all the friction that can result. And so it's really, really important to have leaders of these activities who are seasoned, mindful, have proper training, and so forth, to be able to bring out the best from the group and minimize all the potential pitfalls. So I want to conclude at this point and then leave time for discussion and Q&A. I hope I've convinced you that convergence is a powerful paradigm to address complex problems that are not amenable to single discipline-based discovery model. And it has great potential for both new sort of scientific discovery as well as for translation. That is, solve problem, put it out in the real world, either through the private sector or through some other mechanism. So it has, just because of this problem orientation, there is this tremendous possibility for translation. It can be a major attractor for diverse talents. I mean, I found in my own experience, not so much as biomedical, but like especially when I was dean and I used to talk to students, they used to get very motivated about a problem that they saw when they were growing up. So if you could relate something to something that they observed, especially from minority communities, it motivated them. And so I think it can be a tremendous motivator to bring historically underrepresented people into the research community, but there are critical barriers to progress. And I hope I have shared what I think are some of the critical barriers. And institutions, and here I speak to all of you who are leaders of your respective institution, we have much work to do to realize this potential. This is not going to be easy. It's never been easy. It's not going to be easy. But my hope is that the potential for benefits will overcome the barriers and motivate all of us to work together to achieve great outcomes, which are absolutely needed for the grand challenges that we all face. So with that, I thank you very much for your attention.
So about your experiences in the development of the leadership for these programs? As you said, you need the right sorts of leaders to run the teams and that sort of things. And my experience is that one of the things we struggle with is the areas you can move into depend on the leader for that area, and how you develop them or how you find them, or just your experience in that space.
Yeah, I must say that this is one area where I think that we don't have a lot of successful models, to be completely honest. In my own experience, I've been a chair, I've been a dean, I was at NSF, now I have this job. We essentially rely on self-declared leaders, okay? So people who either by dint of their personality or ambition or what have you, some of them are good and some of them are not so good. But that's sort of the source material that we rely on, and the thing that we are trying to do at UCI through this Team Science Accelerator Lab is, for those who aspire to do this, we provide them guidance through this experience. Have we achieved great successes? I can't say that. But I
So
do.
it's a particular sort of development program. So
Yeah,
you get people who are
development
kind of interested, and you give them experiences as stretch assignments, that sort
Yeah,
of thing.
what we do is, when we see somebody wanting to do this, we sort of bring this group of people, the ones I mentioned, especially Dan and Maritza. Maritza is in business school, she studies leadership, among other things. So we bring, create a space where they begin to have conversations. And not a very formal sort of leadership training model that you might see, say, in an Air Force or something, but it's more sort of a soft touch approach where we might put them either in a workshop or something like that. So that's what we are trying to do in terms of increasing their capacity for leadership.
Just a footnote. So you've been a successful leader. To what do you attribute your success?
I let others speak for my success or lack thereof. I think there are two things that I think have served me well. One is my inherent trait to respect other people. So, I mean, I rarely go into any situation. And I've gotten better at it over time. So I started off with that, but now I'm much more that way. Is that, the other person has a point of view, has a life experience, has knowledge that I don't possess. And so that has been very, very helpful to me, because I think people want to work with others that they think are going to respect them. And second is sort of innate curiosity. So I know the limitations of what I know, and I know that I don't know 99.999% of knowledge that's out there, and I'm very curious about other people who might know something about this that would actually change my view. So I'm always looking for things that will change my views of what I think is right and wrong, or what I think is true and false. And so I think that curiosity extends to all the people I interact with, and that allows me to contribute in ways that I couldn't otherwise.
Yes, Mark.
From a graduate dean perspective, what competencies do you see that we should be instilling in graduate students, and how do we instill those competencies?
I think that's a great question, and the first thing I will tell you is I think there is a new. Oh, I should speak in this microphone. It's my habit to sort of walk around. It's okay. It's okay. I'll answer from here. So first thing I will point to you is there is a new national Academies report on the future of graduate education that actually addresses a lot of this. So I would say that that's sort of the more in-depth answer to what I'm going to say. I do think that it's really, really important for us to break down the traditional model of PhD education, where it goes all the way down to qualifying exam and preliminary exam, where I was chair of EECS at Michigan, and every student, and Mira was one of them, had to take 3 exams in 3 core topics. I think that has got to change. I mean, we got to let students design their expertise area, which should be going beyond the disciplinary or the departmental home, and allow them to pick and choose areas where they can get that knowledge during their PhD education, and to really encourage them to think, oh, so you want to study this, maybe you should take like a minor in biological sciences. So I'm an electrical engineer, right? Maybe you should do a minor in neuroscience, or you should take this course or take that specialty, and allow these grad students much more freedom to get those life experiences, and then through that an ability to learn on their own as they become independent researchers on their own. And that skill set ought to be part of the PhD education process. So that would be one. Certainly, communication, very intentional training in how to communicate science, both to other scientists and fellow researchers, as well as to the public, to non-experts, I think is a very important skill set that grad students need to have. And then some especially on the translation side, giving them opportunity during their grad student years to interact with the private sector, whether that's a startup or a big company, would be another key experience that I would hope that we are able to give. Against that is the caricatured view of a grad student today as a lab rat, right? I mean, this is what most people think of today's graduate students as working, 7 days a week, 10 hours a day or 12 hours a day producing data for their papers.
So
Whatever.
to
So I think yeah.
follow up on the diversity issues
Yes.
you raised,
Yeah.
the main problem facing our country now is health disparities
Yeah.
in health.
Yeah.
And obviously the convergence of life sciences and physical sciences will help to reduce some of those issues related to, for example, in African American women, we have a more aggressive breast cancer, and we can tailor triple negatives and so forth. But at the same time, we know that the major contributor of inequality in health is social determinants of health.
Right.
With that respect, we don't really see convergence of other disciplines like decision makers, political science, and sociology and other things into this. So I'm thinking, to see your opinion, how we can actually encompass those disciplines and enlarge the convergence, not only of the biological and social sciences, but to other areas of non-health related professions.
No, I think you're absolutely on target with that comment. And at NSF, we were very intentional to include social behavioral economic sciences as part of the convergence framing. And in fact, in many of the programs that at NSF that during my time as well as since my time, have very explicitly asked the research community and proposals to include social and behavioral scientists into the team, because I think that thinking is going to be critical. You talked about disparity. I mean, another part of disparity is related to income, right? And so if you look at the cost curves on biomedical innovation right now, I mean, just it was within the last month or 2 months, there was a new drug for a very important disease of children, whose name escapes me. But the cost was like $2.5 million per year. I mean, it's like astronomical cost. And so you say, well, how many people are going to be really to be able to afford that? So to think of new ways about the overall health picture from the point of view of cost and access will certainly require a great deal more social science and so forth to be brought to bear. Another big area is prevention, right? It's like we work so much on, once the disease is there, what do you do? But like so much more could come out of prevention-oriented programs. And again, to shift our healthcare system, which is moving in that direction, but much more slowly than any one of us would like, towards much more focus on prevention and so forth, I think is, again, bringing economists and social scientists and people who understand those fields along with the kind of traditional research from engineering or medicine or biological sciences and computing would be very helpful. And I certainly believe that NSF and to an extent even NIH is sympathetic to that.
So I'd like to follow up this earlier discussion about graduate training.
Yeah.
Which I think is absolutely essential for the future, the next generation coming up. So I was founding director of a computational neuroscience program at UC San Diego, and we had an Iger grant.
Mm-hmm.
One of the requirements was that we offer our students internships in the summer in local companies. So I called up Qualcomm and a couple other places, and they, of course, they loved having our students because eventually they would want to employ them. And so I asked them, well, what do you look for when you hire somebody? You know, how should we be training our students? And I thought for sure that it was, all our great courses and mathematics and biology. No, what they're looking for are team players.
Team players, yeah.
We're training our people to be independent investigators, right? And
Right.
so, we're not training them to be team players.
Yeah, no.
So, I mean, this is a disconnect with your convergence here and the way we've organized our educational system. So what was the second most important? I said, certainly, all of the expertise we're giving them. No, they have to have good communication skills.
Right, yeah.
Now, why? Why would they have to have good, it's because they have to convince management that their project is worth funding. And that means somebody who's a lawyer or somebody who doesn't know anything about the technical side, and you have to communicate to them. So this is something that, again, I don't think we're really doing a great job.
No, I think my last bullet speaks for itself. I think we, the institutions, have a lot of work to do to realize this potential, and it starts with things like this, like can we reform the graduate education? We are doing our grad students no favors by how we are training them, right? I mean, 12, 15 years of postdocs and so forth. I mean, really, the situation is quite not good at all, and we are changing this very reluctantly. Instead of sort of embracing and saying, you know what, this thing is broken, let's sort of, let's come together and make some wholesale changes. I think it's very slow change to what is, I think, obvious to the rest of society in terms of that our graduate education is not really serving the needs of either those people or of the nation. Because we believe we got the right answer, right? We've been doing it for 200 years, so why, but we got, but I'm glad that people like you who are in leadership are much more sympathetic to.
So Rafael, go
Yeah.
first.
How do you promote this idea between the campus and also in a university system? In other words, are you doing a promotion or you allow the professors to be the ones who take the leadership to work in some specific problem? How do you identify the problem where a group?
How do I identify the problems?
No, not you, but the faculty.
Yeah. I think faculty are driven by two fundamental forces. One is their own innate interests, what got them to where they are and where they see the opportunity for the biggest contribution. And second is funding. So even if they are interested, can I get support for doing what I'm doing? And so partly why I think this is an opportune moment is because the funding agencies are also kind of changing. Again, slower than I would like, but they are changing. And the younger faculty want to do this kind of a thing.
Okay.
And so I think that's the way these choices are getting made. And for especially for engineering and computer science faculty, biomedicine is a good attractive target for making a contribution.
But how do they, for example, between campus, did you have if you said that they don't communicate when they are a few meters away, how do you make the professors to get together from one campus to the other one and use the potential of those professors?
Yeah. So a couple of answers to that. One is what we are doing is one of the programs we are running is what is called a seed funding program. So this comes out of my budget. Seed funding. And we give only this to teams. So one thing we said is, okay, this is only available to teams of people working together towards some major target. So that already forces people to sort of, and then if we give an award, we don't make it a requirement, but we say that you must consult my Team Science Accelerator lab so that you know where you are in terms of forming a team and where you need to go. Across campuses, University of California system offers an opportunity for our, like San Diego is not that far, and I know lots of people at Irvine work with people at San Diego. So that happens across campuses, at least in Southern California.
But it's happening.
It's happening, yeah. Not as much as I would like, but it is happening.
Okay.
Tom? Oh, you. Yeah.
Paula first. Yeah, thank
You talked about the challenges.
you. It's on.
You talked about the challenges of rewards
Yeah.
in terms of convergence.
Yeah,
But I think another challenge on many campuses is the tenure system.
yeah,
Because, and it relates also to recruitment.
yeah.
Because at least in my own experience, when we've been trying to build teams across departments, oftentimes they're not just across departments, they're across colleges.
Yeah.
And the way in which tenure is housed in universities, I think this is a major challenge
Yeah, it is.
for confronting convergence, and I just appreciate comments on that.
Yeah, so definitely tenure is a big part of the problem. And the good thing is that there is increasing knowledge. So there is a paper I highlight in research policy for promotion and tenure, specifically on this kind of work. And then this idea that this group of experts that I convened on Team Science came up with, which is this faculty Team Science Collaborative Index, which is a way of helping a faculty member articulate their contribution. Does that overcome all these other barriers? No, this is just one step of many. So educating the various committees, my experience and everything that it tells me is that the committees at the very top at the university level, they are not the barriers. The barriers start in the department.
I think the barriers are in the department.
Start in the department.
And I think the barriers are also in recruiting. Because
It's the same
hard
barriers.
Sometimes to
Yeah,
convince
yeah.
young faculty that it's going to work out for
Yeah,
them
yeah.
in that kind of environment.
I think, I think you and I are in the same page that the real barriers are at the department level. And that's where, having deans and department chairs who are more enlightened about this are really, really important, growing that leadership so that they can exercise the right influence during discussions on tenure and promotion and hiring. Because it all depends upon faculty meetings and the case that's getting made. And the more we exercise that leadership during those conversations is the way this change is going to happen. My hope also is that the junior faculty are much more willing to do this than perhaps the retiring faculty.
I'm curious if you or anyone else in the room has an opinion on whether some of the advances that we're seeing today in information technology and things like AI, whether that is going to reinforce the convergence trend or actually diminish it, because it's now possible to discover concepts and explore information in fields that we're not very familiar with
Right.
in relatively short order too.
Right. So I think for the most part, it will help with these types of activities, the access to information and the modern machine learning AI-based tools that are becoming available. So I see that as a force for the positive in making these things easier to do than they were before.
Yeah, one more question.
So you talked about how attacking this problem is going to require some persistence, and
Yeah.
it's not going to be solved in a year or even a couple of years. And you also mentioned how, in addition to the interest of the faculty, it's also can they get funding for the kinds of work that they are going to do. So my question is, given what you know about the environment in most funding agencies, what do you think is the likelihood that a long-term strategy could be developed through the NSF and the NIH that will allow this persistence so that we're not sort of changing the topic du jour?
I think that, Tom, that's a great question. And given your own experience, I'm sure you have views, you have views on this, which, let me say this, I'm cautiously optimistic. Cautious because the funding, I mean, I spent 4 years in Washington and I saw all these agencies. I think at the leadership levels, they realize that scientific and engineering research has to contribute to the national good. It's really an important driver. So if you think about Franz Cordova or Francis Collins going and testifying in front of Congress and Senate, I mean, the more stories they have where they have really made a difference, I think is a positive. And those differences are in things that people can understand, and health challenges, including disparity, would be great targets for them to be able to say some good things about. So I think from that point of view, the force is for the good. The MIT report was very much done in view of 2016 elections. The reason Sharp and company did all this in sort of June of 2016 is because they wanted to have this thing ready for the next administration. So I think there is a lot of political savvy behind this. However, having said all this optimistic thing, I mean, NSF did adopt at the end of the day this as one of their 10 big ideas. So I think that's progress, because the NSF, I mean, Dr. Franz Cordova does talk about this in her speeches. So I think that's a positive. She believes in this. I think the challenge, just like in a university, are at the yeah, I don't want to say lower levels, but at the program manager levels, because they are connected to their research communities, right? And so if I'm a program manager for fluid dynamics in CMMI, I want to be able to go back to fluid dynamics conference and say, well, I'm supporting, your work, right? That's where the challenges lie. And so the budgets are, I mean, Tom, the budgets are constructed directorate by directorate, division by division. And so will there be a kind of a wholesale change to that? That's where my cautiousness comes in, is because of the way the budget constructions are at all these agencies, including NIH. It's sort of, NIH is by institute, right? The budget is not for NIH, budget is for each institute, and each institute has its own drivers. I mean, I would say at NIH, the only institute that is directly doing this is NIBIB, which is a modest-sized institute. I mean, now NCI does fund a lot of this kind of stuff, so different institutes are doing this, but not at the level that would be really great. So I think the vector is in the right direction. I think the societal force is in the right direction. I think the universities are thinking about it in the right direction. The pace of change is slower than we need, is my sort of long-winded answer to your question.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.